Welcome, everybody. This is really exciting to have you all here. We're here today to ask an important question, which is how to accelerate the small businesses who are bringing nature-positive innovations to millions of farmers. Well, I'm just going to go through some call etiquette first. Please do use the comment box if you want to raise questions or share anything. Certainly put your name and organization in there right now. It's great for people to see who else is in the room. Keep your mute on unless you're talking. It's lovely to have your video on if you feel able to. It's nice, makes us feel like we're in the room together. The call is being recorded. Another way of helping us know who you are is actually in your little box there. There's 3 buttons and you can change your name so we can see which organization you're from as well. So I'm going to do that for myself right now. There we go. Last thing to say, just with lots of businesses on the line, please don't share any commercially sensitive information, because it's going to be recorded, and also we're not supposed to share commercially sensitive information with each other. So bear that in mind. Thanks so much to our sponsors, EIT Food, who through EU funding are supporting this dialogue series. So really grateful to them. This call is a dialogue as part of a series where we're kind of bringing together the various coalitions of action that came out of the UN Food Systems Summit with the small businesses and the kind of movement of small businesses that also came out of the UN Food Systems Summit that we've gathered together under the Good Food platform, the Good Food Hub. And in particular, we're now working together with the Nature Positive Innovation Coalition, who have been a delight to work with. Feels like a real bringing together of 2 important threads from the summit. And really that partnership is anchored in Dr. Dinesh, who is the coordinator for the Nature Positive Innovation Coalition, led a lot of that work on nature positive innovation throughout the UN Food Systems Summit, and has since left CGIAR where he was and has set up his own Think and Do Tank, Climb Eat. And so actually, let me just hand over to you, Danush, to introduce yourself and actually to set the stage here about why this is so important. And really, why is nature positive innovation so important to both the climate crisis and the future of food? Let me hand over to you.
Thank you, Ian, and thanks for a kind introduction. I'm still not used to being called a doctor. I've only been a doctor for 4 days. So that's strange, but nice. Good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. But I want to give you a bit of background, but also the way forward, because we are really focusing this session on COP27 and COP28 potentially as well, on how we can mobilize the power that small and medium enterprises have in catalyzing nature positive innovation. So in the last 2 years before I started my own organization, I worked at the CGIAR, and we were partnering with the UK, and it's great to see Dan from FCDO here and with his colleagues, and also Federico from the High Level Champion for COP26. So we were partnering together for the 2-year journey to see how to bring agriculture innovation to the table at COP26. And we were successful in that. At the COP, one of the key outcomes was the Glasgow Breakthrough in Agriculture, which really recognizes the power that innovation has to address the climate crisis, to address the need to increase production, to feed a global growing population, to address the biodiversity crisis. So it was really successful. And there was the Climate Short Global Action Agenda for Innovation in Agriculture, which over 200 different organizations supported, including over 20 different countries. So when we see what happened at Glasgow, innovation at the center of agriculture-related outcomes. But then we had that question at that time, how are we going to link this climate conversation with the food conversation, which was happening in the UN Food Systems Summit? So together with these partners and many others, we worked together with the UN Food Systems Summit arrangements, the different action tracks, particularly on Action Track 3, where I was the lead for innovation. And we created a coalition on nature positive innovation. So what does this mean? And we want to tap into that political momentum around innovation, which was created in the lead up to the COP and make it work for nature and for food. And what we see is in post-World War II, there's been this focus on the green revolution and more production. And this has come at a price in terms of exceeding planetary boundaries, in terms of the climate crisis. And we want to shift that narrative, shift that action from doing no harm to actually doing good. So nature positive. So that's what we want to do. And the way we do it is by harnessing the power that innovation has. And final piece that comes as part of this puzzle, and it's great to see Anna introduce herself from the 100 Million Farmers platform of the World Economic Forum. So we were also working with WEF and your colleague Lisa Sweet to see not just the upstream of developing innovations, but how can we get that to scale? So as part of the innovation lever of the Food System Summit, we thought about how do we get to 100 million farmers? And our answer was in three parts. One is we need to accelerate the pace of innovation to like 10 times. So 10 times the current level of innovation that we need. We also need 100,000 entrepreneurs, and that's what we're going to answer here today. And we all need 10 times more the finance that's currently invested in innovation to get there. So we have all this excitement, and then we had this conversation with the Good Food Hub and with Ian, like how do we get there? And we have this missing middle, or is around how do we create those entrepreneurs? How do we create the businesses which can actually help drive this political momentum, the funding forward? And that's why we are having this dialogue with you, because we have this coalition now, we have all these great commitments. Working with you, we'd like to advance this forward in the lead up to COP27, 28 and beyond.
Oh, so exciting. I'd say it did feel like a wonderful match coming together. So this call today, we're going to have in 3 parts. The first part is actually we're going to get inspired about what SMEs can offer. So that's going to be the first bit, listening to some SMEs and hearing their stories and why they're so important to this transition. Secondly, we're going to share a very concrete idea. We want a COP nature positive accelerator, and we've got a construct about how we might organize that. And this is our first chance to sort of a sort of sharing party. It's still, you know, definitely an idea being formed, and we really want your feedback. So that's the last bit, is we'll go into breakout groups to kind of get really tap into your expertise and insights about how we could design such an accelerator that's right for this moment in time. And then we'll come back at the end, share those insights, and actually invite people, if you want to say, yeah, we're going to get behind this and work together on it, we'd invite some kind of putting your hand up at that moment. So the first part, though, is really to go and say, well, what's up with these small businesses? And my own journey here, we did the work, as I explained, to kind of bring small businesses into the UN Food Systems Summit. And it is so inspiring. They're so action oriented. They're really hungry to make a difference on the ground and bring innovations to scale, reaching farmers. They are the kind of interface to get farmers linked into markets, to bring them new innovations. They are kind of such an important part of driving change. And we've got some brilliant businesses on the call today who are doing that work. And actually, I just want to flag 3 that I know on the call that we're not going to talk to, just to give you some extra flavor. I know we've got Lizel here, her company, they have figured out how to oxygenate irrigation water. So the water going in into farms has got high oxygen levels, and that's improving soil health because it kickstarts microbial development. I probably said that wrong. Anyway, Liza can explain. Second, we've got Pratap, who has a wonderful, he's an engineer he's based in the Netherlands, he's Nepalese, he's got this wonderful kind of, there's this look behind him there. You can see his amazing self-powered irrigation machine. Amazing. So there's that piece, which is stopping the use of fossil fuels within irrigation systems and making them affordable. And then Rafaela in Brazil, she is kind of sourcing her inputs in a way that is nature positive So great businesses are out there all over the place doing this work, pushing for scale. We're going to have a conversation right now with two that are really on that journey, super impressive. They are Uja, based in India, that are bringing kind of solar powered services to farmers, and then the Toothpick project, which in Kenya is bringing a kind of a fungal herbicide to address a kind of pest on called striker. So we're going to hear a bit more about their journey to bring nature positive innovation and see what we can learn as a basis of saying, well, we need more people like this. How do we support them? So let's bring forward, first of all, we've got Amit and Mashwata from Uja, who are going to share a little bit about their story on what's the nature positive innovation that they're bringing to farmers, and what was the sort of support for innovation and scaling up market adoption that means you're beginning to go to scale here, because you've got a great story to tell. So let me hand over to you for a little 5-minute input, and then we'll jump to the Toothpick project.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mahashweta. I'm working as a project officer at Uja Development Solution. So at Uja, we are trying to solve the agrarian crisis, which is faced by small and marginal farmers in India by providing solar powered services for smallholder farmers. So currently we are providing 3 integrated agri-energy services: first irrigation, second milling, and third cold storages. So in India, the upfront cost of solar powered services, solar powered infrastructures are so high that small farmers are often not able to afford them even after getting subsidies. So our innovation lies in providing all these services, all these infrastructures as a service. We install, finance, and maintain these services. So as you can see here, pictures of the solar pump, mill, and also the cold storages. So by using our irrigation as a service, farmers are able to save almost 20% more than the diesel, as the prices of diesel are rising over the past few years. Then with solar pumps, we have seen that it's not often used throughout the year. So we have also connected the solar pumps with solar mill. And on the days when the solar pump doesn't run, we use it as a solar mill, and the farmers also save 50% versus the diesel mills. And often the mills are located at a location which becomes very difficult for the farmers to go and process their food. Our services are mostly at the farm gate, and which makes it easier for remote locations, farmers from remote locations to use it. Lastly, there is almost 20 to 30% of the post-harvest loss that the farmers face, and there is a lack of cold storages in India. So we have also installed the solar cold storages, and the farmers pay per crate per day on the basis of the use they do. About our business model. So our business model is inclusive because there is no upfront cost for the small and marginal farmers. We are the one who install the structures for the farmers, and our model includes farmers who are located in the weak grid locations of India, where electric pumps are not able to reach, and even the farmers do not get subsidized solar services. It is affordable because the farmers do not have to pay an upfront cost, and our tariffs are 20 to 50% lower than those tariffs offered by other services. It is reliable because we also employ local operators from the local service areas, and we bring a gainful employment in the area who operate and also collect regular payment from the customers who use the service. And this service is you can continue.
Go ahead, complete your point. Yeah, I'll take over from the next slide.
Yes, we sell reliable and affordable services throughout the year, and we maintain the structures. So whenever there's an issue, as in India, there's a lack of green jobs and also lack of skills who will operate and maintain the system. So even after there is a problem, we go and maintain the services so that the farmers keep on using the structures.
So yeah, thanks, Mashweta. I'll take it from here. Just to reiterate what she said, our innovation really lies, since we are discussing innovation, in removing the upfront cost barrier, which was leaving out nearly 85% of farmers in India. And that's a huge population, just given the absolute number of farmers in India. 60% of our population depends on farming for their livelihoods. So yes, having said that, we were posed a few questions, and I'll speak on those. So what is constraining our innovation? So we obviously have to be mindful of, where we are lacking, or what is it in the external environment that is preventing us to, grow, or, offer better services or cheaper services. So yes, there's always pretty much all SMEs do face this problem, access to finance. And to then, counter this problem, we've obviously adopted a blended finance model, given we need to finance these assets and these are expensive. And therefore, we need to subsidize our assets, the CapEx. And therefore, we still, in our financing model, we have 30% donor funding, non-returnable capital, and 70 is institutional capital, both debt and equity. So that's one innovation to remove the finance barrier for us. Second concern a lot of investors have, stakeholders have, and we ourselves as an organization, we come obviously from the perspective of also solving the climate emergency. So we are obviously very aware of the groundwater over extraction and depletion problem, because most of the irrigation in India, and at least in the northern and eastern part where we operate, irrigation is through groundwater, because we don't have access to a lot of other sources of water. So what we have done is, by putting a price on water, because we're still not giving it out for free. We are a for-profit social enterprise, although we offer it at a community scale, but we put a price on it, although it is affordable and, like Mashweta said, cheaper than incumbents and alternatives. But it still prevents them from overuse because there is a tendency for flooding their fields. So yeah, that helps us, maintain the groundwater. And we have built an internal tool as well that allows us to measure the groundwater when we enter a project site, and throughout the year we monitor that. And we only work in areas where the annual rainfall is enough to replenish that. And lastly, what is constraining also is competition with other methods of irrigation, which would be electric pumps, which are obviously powered by coal-fired power plants. That's how our national grid draws its electricity. And then, of course, subsidized solar pumps that are handed out by the government. But those are targeted at individual farmers. And because of the subsidies are pretty significant, 60% of the capital cost, but even the balance 40% is unaffordable to most farmers. And therefore, you're still leaving out the last mile low-income farmers, and that's who we are addressing. That's our market. On the other side, you have what is supporting our innovation is so financial and strategic implementation partners. So how we select our project sites, we partner with local civil society organizations, nonprofit organizations, foundations that have already been working with these communities and already have good networks and positions of trust. And therefore, we have an easy entry and introduction and mobilization. And these partners then help mobilize these farmers, make them aware of our services and its benefits. And therefore, we can work together. We also have some financial contribution from our partners in some cases, and that further goes to subsidize our CapEx, and therefore we are able to offer even more affordable tariffs. The second innovation is in-house agronomists. So we realized that, okay, we are offering these 3 core services, but there's still something missing, right? And because most farmers are doing 1 or 2 crops, which is being traditionally done in that region, and an agronomist then brings the knowledge to help them grow, diversify their cropping, and allows them to then grow other high-value crops as well, and also helps with yields and productivity and so on and so forth. And lastly, and so we have agronomists within the team, and we provide free workshops and training to our communities. And lastly, there's been, like Mashweta also mentioned, diesel prices were deregulated in India about a decade ago. And obviously it's controlled by the international markets, and they have been rising, as we know, and they seem to be rising with all sorts of externalities. Yeah. So, and therefore offering something that is cheaper and replacing those diesel pumps is another innovation that we've worked on. Lastly, on this slide, we have what's constraining and supporting our ability to scale up, right? So on the constraining side, we have high capital costs because we are financing these assets. And then the second is low awareness about technologies in general, because yeah, most of it is labor intensive agriculture, and solar technology, because prices are falling, but still not within the reach of smallholder farmers. So those are some constraints. And what is supporting our innovation is we have managed to get together a very passionate, young, talented team that is willing to be on the field, in rural, challenging environments. Then, like Mashwata mentioned, we also hire people from those local communities. We upskill them, and they are actually our day-to-day operators. So that helps as well. Then what we do is we try and go deep before we go wide, which means that we try and bunch our installations close together. Which we call a cluster model. And in a cluster, we try and do 4 or 5 irrigation pumps, a couple of agro-processing mills. And if there's a requirement and there's horticulture crops grown in that region, then also a cold storage for perishable produce. We have a very robust operational process, the way we select, the way we operate, our payment collection methods, and so on and so forth. So yeah, quite a bit of innovation has gone in over there. And last but not least, which we already spoke about in the previous slide, so I will save time over there. Local partnerships, which is very key to our growth.
Thank you so much. I have to say, it's so impressive, and it's when we in these kind of meetings, like we were part of this wider forum meeting. There's so much big talk about grand ideas. To hear you doing this with farmers, very practically transitioning them into a means of production that is much more nature positive, is fantastic to hear. And I also hear some of the big challenges that we'll get to in a minute about accessing kind of investment that allows you to take that to scale, but also operating in a regulatory environment that isn't necessarily conducive, that you're struggling to compete with other actors that are perhaps being subsidized within the old regime in some way. And it's going to take regulatory change before you become the most competitive option. So it's compelling to hear all that. Let's move on just to a second example. In the meantime, if people have got comments or questions, throw them in, because we've probably got a chance for perhaps 1 or 2 questions back to these 2 businesses at the end. But feel free to put those in the chat box. Claire, tell us a bit about the toothpick project, the impact you're having, and what's supporting or constraining the development of your business.
All right. So first, I'll apologize. I'm calling from my car in the desert in Nevada, but hopefully I don't have too many people passing by me behind me. So I'm Claire Baker. I'm the director and co-founder of the Toothpick Company, which is a revolutionary herbicide company based in Kenya. Actually, if you can go back to that previous slide, Alice, that would be great. Our business uses biology to fight biology in one of the biggest battles against weeds. Our preceding all the SDGs, our innovation was designed with principles of reducing hunger, reducing poverty, and building economies at the village level, empowering women, and taking care of land and water. So you can go back to that previous slide. You can see there's a pretty little purple flower. Maybe you can go back to it. Thank you. That little purple flower is called striga, or witchweed, and it is attacking a maize field. You can't really see any maize there because of the striga. Next slide. Striga attacks crops like maize, sorghum, millet, dryland rice, and it's on 40 million farms across sub-Saharan Africa. If a farmer has striga on her field, she'll lose 20 to 100% of her crop. And striga is therefore considered Africa's worst pest threat to food security. Our novel bioherbicide innovation utilizes selected strains of a locally sourced plant fungus, Fusarium oxysporum formis speciale. It is specific to striga. It doesn't harm other crops or soil or animals. In our innovation, we selected strains that excrete high levels of specific amino acids that effectively kill striga. This is the game changer innovation, this virulence enhanced selection process. Then we can deliver the fungus to the village level, dried onto toothpicks, where we send it to village inoculum producers. They prepare a fresh live inoculum by putting the toothpicks into cooked rice. And after 3 days, all of that rice is coated with the fungus, making a secondary inoculum. And then the farmer simply plants a pinch of that with each of her maize seeds, and that wipes out the striga. The product is called Kichawi Kill. Kichawi means magic, which is a good connection to the witchweed. And our proof of concept trials took place in 2014 and 2015 and was funded by the Gates Foundation. We also have done a bunch of controlled regulatory trials, and all of these consistently showed an increase of crop yield of about 42 to 56%. And these are on controlled trials. So basically we're seeing a full restoration of yield. In real life trials, in a more severe infestation, a farmer may only yield 1 bag of maize, 90 kilogram bag of maize with striga. And if she uses Kichawi Kill, she can get her yield back up closer to about 20 per acre. A farm should be able to yield 20 to 30 bags per acre. So she'll still have some work to do with soil restoration and maybe using better seeds, but getting over that striga barrier is a huge first step. You can see here in this demonstration plot that was done by our partners at Farm to Market Alliance, you can clearly see where Kichawi Kill was applied on the left and where the striga is attacking on the right. We started our regulatory process in 2015 after those proof of concept trials, and this included a series of field trials, toxicology and ecotox testing, molecular characterization, labeling, etc. And I'm pleased to announce that after over 5 years of those protocol, we finally received our full commercial regulatory approval in November 2021, which was just 5 months ago. So we're entering our second full commercial season right now. I wish I had actually included photos. Our team's out in the field every day doing demonstrations. If you're in Kenya, they were on Shamba Shape Up yesterday. During that regulatory protocol period, we also initiated a new iteration of our product. This is using our same fungal strains as a seed coating innovation. And we are now starting that regulatory process. It's going to take a couple of years, even though it's the same fungal strains. That's just the protocol. So we're hoping to have that product approved in 2014, and that'll be a product we can sell then in aggregate stores, and it can be used with mechanization versus this rice village inoculum production. We do like the village inoculum production because that drives the economy at the village level. 100% of the funding stays in the village level, but we want to give some alternatives and figure out which works the best. Next slide. Our solution is one of the first bioherbicides to be commercialized in the world, and we anticipate we'll reach scale in Kenya in 2025. This is when we reach approximately 100,000 farmers. Our sights are now set on expanding innovation to other striga-impacted countries across sub-Saharan Africa. In 2018, we selected scientists in 12 other countries. Well, if you can go back again, sorry, sensitive trigger. So we have scientists that we started training in 2018 in 12 other countries. Unfortunately, our second training got disrupted by COVID, and we're still hoping to pull that off maybe in the next year. Once these scientists are funded, they'll be able to initiate the required field trials for research, and they'll have to navigate the regulatory protocol. We'll have to navigate that regulatory protocol in every country in sub-Saharan Africa until there's some sort of harmonization of biocontrol policy within trade zones. Our long-term goal is to shift the $34 billion global weed management industry. Currently, this $34 billion industry is entirely synthetic chemical herbicides. And so our goal is to shift to a nature positive solution. And the nature positive part's really actually very important when you're looking at developed countries like the United States, where we are seeing heavy herbicide resistance in weeds such as Palmer amaranth and glyphosate did not used to have any weeds resistant to it. Now it has over 24 weeds resistant to it due to overuse. So there are a lot of reasons. In Africa, we're really working with the humanitarian approach, and as we develop into developed countries with heavy herbicide use, it'll be really a nature positive climate greenhouse gas reduction use. Our successes, next slide. Our successes are due to strong tested innovation and strategic implementation and science partners, and what we call the perfect storm that is breaking down the chemical herbicide industry, which is consumer concerns, lawsuits, and this increasing issue with herbicide resistant superweeds that don't have another solution. And I'm looking forward to talk. I won't get into the constraints too much because I know we're going to talk about that, but we're mainly constrained by funding, regulation, lack of scientific infrastructure, and then a big thing is time, which goes with funding. So we look forward to discussing those, and back to you, Ian.
Thank you so much. Again, another great example of a company doing on the ground work to bring nature positive innovations. And I hear in both stories actually that I think in some of these high level discussions, it's almost like we separate out the work, but actually in the work of your companies, you hold all these competing agendas in one sort of service offering and one product delivery. I actually think, just to stay on time and make sure we do have chance for breakout, I'm actually going to keep us rolling forwards into sharing our thoughts on a nature positive accelerator, so we can then get into the breakouts where we'll unpack that and get everybody's input on them. So Alice, actually, if you want to put my slides up, I think we'll go straight there and then we stay on time. Yeah, so in those stories, you know, I find it really inspiring about the leadership you're bringing, actually, the change required, because looking across the change required in our food system at the moment, as Dhanush said, we've fundamentally been drawing down on natural capital across, whether that's soil health or climate or on water, all of which have just been mentioned, biodiversity. Basically, we've got through the last 50, 70 years with a focus on efficiency at the cost of natural capital, but that cannot carry on. We're going to collapse some of those systems in specific places. And so we have to drive innovation at a new pace. We have to transition the food system. It's the only way. We look at climate change and the 30% contribution that comes from food and ag. We're going to have to turn that around and actually have food and ag not just be about production, but actually be about stewarding our natural capital and restoring it. And these small businesses are bringing those innovations that can do that work. So into that, as we look ahead, as Dhanush said, we've had these different themes, working with small businesses, working with nature positive innovation, that have come through at the UN Food Systems Summit at COP27. And our two organizations, so my company is Wasafiri and Dhanush with Climate Eat, we feel like it's time to do something after all that talk, and actually turn up with driving some key accelerations that can support that transition. So if you go to the next slide, Alice, we're really looking at seeing 4 accelerations that need to happen in parallel. They're interdependent. Obviously, at the end of the day, it's about getting producers, whether they are farmers or fisher folk, to adopt nature positive practices. But their current practices are much part of a dominant system that has been built up over the last 50 years. So it's going to take a lot of change and support and innovation to make that happen, and working with those farmers. And yeah, there's some channels that could do that, perhaps through extension programs and the like. But really what we're witnessing is that entrepreneurs and their small businesses are, like we're just hearing, really the ones that are thinking about this and bringing, pioneering those new solutions and working with farmers at a meaningful scale. So I think Dhanush, you flagged saying, well, if we're going to work with 1 million farmers, we need to work with 10,000 small businesses. They are our aggregators. I'm curious, actually, Claire and Amit, how many farmers do you each work with at the moment?
Sorry, Ian, can you repeat that question, please?
Just how many farmers are you working with through your products? Do you have a sense of the numbers?
Yes, of course we do. Yeah, we're working with about 5,000 right now.
Okay, and Claire?
And just to add to that, our vision is to reach 10 million over the next decade. Yeah, that's our vision.
There you go. Claire?
Our very first partial season, we reached 746. Our second season, just under 2,000. That was our first full season. And this season, we're out in the field right now. We anticipate over 4,000 farmers this season.
Now, in those
we're working with those village inoculant producers. So those village inoculant producers are working with not that many farmers, but they will scale up to 200 as they become more familiar with the product. So we'll be able to grow pretty quickly.
So yeah, in those numbers, you hear the reality of like how small businesses are the bridge to scaling impact with farmers and making that transition. So how do we back these businesses? Well, we need to listen to them as we are doing about their struggle around getting the support for innovation and scaling them to markets. Now, a key barrier to that is absolutely making sure they get the investment they need to go to scale as well. So we're hearing, and I think this is, Dan, your work as well on this climate shot, working with impact investors, we're hearing that capital flow, that impact investors are beginning to look into this sector, but they don't quite know how to work with it yet. It's not like renewables. They don't quite understand the space, how you measure impact, and therefore, where should they be investing? And they don't know where to find these businesses and which ones are really ready for commercial investment. So, again, talking to both Claire and Amit, both are your businesses. You've come through this path of getting quite a lot of philanthropic capital to get you going, but are beginning to have meaningful conversations with more commercial investment. So you are on that journey. We need, though, to increase the flow of capital and help impact investors understand how to invest in this space. The last acceleration we need is to say, at the moment, we've got a policy environment that is built for production. All the subsidies drive that at the cost of natural capital, and those needs to change. If we're listening to your small businesses, we will hear where the blocks are, where you are struggling to outcompete because of the subsidies. I think you mentioned for more diesel-based solutions or limited regulation of water. There's all sorts of things in there or the pace of through which you can push through the regulatory approval of your new innovation, Claire. Those sorts of things, we need regulation to change. Otherwise, businesses like you will not grow and outcompete. So those all need to happen together. And it's into that sense, those 4 accelerations, that we want to propose the idea for this accelerator. So next slide, Alice. What do we say we want to do in practice? Well, we want to find maybe 8 countries that over the next year or 2 are willing to kind of host an accelerator. So we think it should be country focused, where we would find some impact investors that are looking for investments. We then run a competition where they kind of help judge and find some investment ready businesses. Maybe it's just 8 in each country, but we will find those businesses and back them. Then do the matchmaking, support those businesses to be ready for some kind of pitching or some discussions to showcase them to investors and commercial partners. And VC4A, our friends at VC4A, we worked with a long time. Ben, you're on the call. We know you're great at doing that work, so we'll hopefully get some help from you for that. But once we've got those businesses and investors talking to each other, we should also understand where the regulatory barriers are. So can we then sit down with government and have a kind of round table, an innovation lab, where you share in this country what's stopping you be more ambitious and scale faster and scale up and innovate faster? And hopefully working with perhaps the forum and your food innovation labs and your kind of relationships you have with governments, and in the context of these country pathways, can we identify those kind of changes that are needed and perhaps integrate them into the national pathways that are being developed? So that is the bread and butter of what we see a country process being. But we also think we've got a global piece. We need to influence everybody. And so this becomes these amazing stories like Uja and Toothpick. We should inspire the world with them, say, hey, this nature positive future is possible. Danush, Climate, you've been great about kind of campaign work over the years and turning up at COPs and sending some messages. We know food hasn't been high enough on the agenda. We know it's going to be at the next COPs. So let's take those messages out. Let's use that to target investors, policymakers, and in fact, farmers who need to believe this is the future. And then there is this sort of growing energy behind and kind of commitment behind having a food pavilion that Climate are organising people around at COP27. And we expect it to happen at COP28 as well, to get some of these entrepreneurs to turn up, tell the world what's going on, tell what's needed alongside investors. And actually, ultimately, we are offering a model for countries to accelerate through this transition. So that is the overall idea. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to kind of go into breakout groups to unpack that. But let me just share some questions that are in my mind. We've already got some partners that we're talking to, and we need to consolidate that. But really, I'm asking, are we ambitious enough given the urgency? So, and that partly is about that last question there about the timeline and what's realistic that we can do by November COP27, and what might we be able to do in a year after that by COP28. So we've got the right level of ambition. Then are we really thinking, well, we're going to have to transition both producers, entrepreneurs, investors, and government, and kind of have accelerations in each. So we actually, in a minute, when we go into breakout groups, we're going to ask each group to give some general feedback, but think about each of those and whether this program will really adequately support that group and that on their transition journey. And I think we probably know some better than others. I know I need to learn more about impact investors. Where should we do it? Or should we just do it in perhaps developing economies, or is it really important we're also doing in Europe and the USA? Because they definitely need to go on this journey too, and there's good energy there. Which other partners or your organizations, there are others that we need to crowd in? Where do we do this together? And I know our question that's very, we're going to get ready by COP27, we need to secure some funding. So any ideas on that would be great too. So those are the questions. So right now I'm going to hand over to Alice, who's going to break us up into some different groups. So we're going to have one group. And your challenge for breakout groups is, how might this proposed accelerator really kind of drive this transition? And in particular, focusing on different constituencies. So we've got group one, it's going to be with Nikki Feltham, looking at farmers and fishers. Group two with Danush, small businesses. And then group three with me would be on impact investors. And then group four with Leanne on governments. So let me hand over Alice, send us off into our rooms. I'm actually going to hand over to Danush to take us to the end here.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And I'm just coming off this very exciting discussion and on ambition. And what I really took off was we should be more ambitious, and maybe we'll hear from other groups if they agreed as well. So maybe each group should have a voluntary rapporteur. So I'm just going to invite them to share very quickly in 2 minutes. That's about 200 words. What you found, what were your key takeaways which came out from those discussions? So maybe turning to group one on farmers and fishers, how did you feel on the level of ambition, and what more do we need to do? Who's going to talk on behalf of farmers and fishers? Nikki, is that you or someone else was nominated?
So I think I'm double handing with Erin. I think we were both scribbling frantically, but a couple of key points that I took. Generally, a warm, positive reception to the suggestion. Some helpful suggestions of other groups or organisations to involve that I took down, which I think is really important as we're setting out on this. Flags about other groups doing similar things or kind of related tangential things. So I've got various notes of follow-up there. some good flags regarding the sort of the needs and direction of the impact investing fraternity, particularly around metrics, and needing to look at that. And also, I think some helpful sort of gentle warning maybe from Federico regarding the role that impact investors can play in terms of sort of picking winners and generating great traction for individual SMEs. But of course, we need to keep an eye on the entire sort of ecosystem and the whole community, and wanting to sort of raise everybody, as well as some winners that we pick. Erin, did you want to add anything else on top of those couple of thoughts?
Just real quick, yeah, there were some notes, just to echo what Nikki said, of connection points. There was a lot of the SMEs themselves have unique needs that often are not addressed by the government and the, I guess, people that are interested in nature-based solutions. So making sure that we can cater to the unique needs of this constituency, I think, was reinforced several times, and that there's a lot of work going on that the SMEs could plug into. But there was also this recognition, I think, by Federico's, the SMEs are also tapped out, but have a lot of talent to contribute. So how do you make the most of that? So I've captured as much as I can of everyone's introductions and appreciate our team's feedback.
Thanks, Erin, and thanks, Nikki. And Erin, maybe you can also think about how you'd like to, in terms of intent, where you want to go forward, and maybe we'll come back to that once we've heard from others and on what happens. So now turning to the next group, which is my group on small businesses. Liesl, you have 2 minutes to quickly take us through the
Thanks, Ganesh. Definitely interest from the SMEs in taking part in such an accelerator program. Seen as potentially being very valuable in terms of exposure and just face time with potential investors or scaling partners, especially in terms of how to actually, so firstly, just getting in touch with them, being known to them, but also how to work with them. What do they need from an SME? And then just some things to note in terms of, firstly, we thought definitely it could scale up in terms of ambition. And then on a practical side, it is taking part in these sorts of accelerators, it's a huge time commitment for an SME who very often have very limited capacity. So it's very important to be clear from the beginning what the potential benefits are going to be. If there's going to be, if it's just exposure, is there actually a pot of money that will be used at the end for scaling or for some programs? So that needs to be, SMEs need to know what they're going into. And then also it needs to be suitable for companies at various stages of growth because they have different needs. And then also potentially it would be useful if the program can help SMEs articulate how they actually add nature positive impact beyond just financial returns, because there's sometimes a gap between sort of the focus. There is the focus, traditionally the focus on the financial side, but this is about those added benefits to how to deliver that information in a useful, both of those sets of information in a useful way to investors.
Yeah, thank you so
much. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything.
No, I think you perfectly captured all the different elements and those additional benefits beyond, financial returns. How do you capture that and report that and sell that so that it's attractive to investors? And let's maybe go to the group from impact investors to hear their side of the story and what they're looking for and how this fits in with them. So this was led by Ian. Is there someone who's agreed to report back from the group?
I was volunteered to report back from the group.
Yes, Rex. Please.
This is Rex Raymond with TIF's initiative.
Just go for it. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks, Dinesh. So yeah, definitely, I think interest and support for the concept from our group as well, with some interesting and I think very helpful reflections. So, and I'll categorize them a little bit. So the one comment was about the importance of and what's appealing is the ecosystem of services to to support the SMEs in their path to growing their success. So questions around kind of where to focus, what kind of existing ecosystem do you want to plug into? Do you want to focus or start in some countries where there are already some existing accelerators and hubs and some parts of the ecosystem and look to strengthen those? So that's, or do you want to go into some countries where there are fewer existing programs? And even though that may be a little bit more difficult to start, idea came up, do you want to build some research around this? So do you want to focus on, does this program want to focus on a few countries, really double down in those countries to create a proof of concept, do the learning along the way, and then turn it into some type, some off-the-shelf solution, or that stakeholders in other countries can adapt to their own environments and needs, kind of like a franchise model. So that was kind of part of the conversation. Some recommendations around being really clear about the profile of the SMEs that this accelerator program wants to support. Also being really clear about the profile of the target investors both in the program and for the matchmaking with the SMEs that would be targeted. Yep. And then sort of value addition, and I think a helpful component is making the link to the regulatory piece and the policy piece. So bringing business stakeholders together with national governments.
That's perfect, Rex, because we'll go straight to the policy piece and hear from the group on governments, which was facilitated by Leanne, and who's reporting from that group?
Yeah, we were so busy talking that I forgot to ask, so I can quickly summarize given time. So yeah, I think some of the things that were mentioned by the other groups are also things that came up, but I think something I didn't hear yet was the importance on focusing, especially if you're matching SMEs with investors, like not just getting them together on a cocktail party, but really working to build relationships between those two. So there's more like longer term relationships that can really help SMEs actually land the funding instead of just meeting the people who have the money. And then another point that that people liked in the conversation is indeed the link of these SMEs of the accelerator with policy going on the global level. So really linking to that policy discourse, because there are indeed a lot of bottlenecks that get stuck there. And then linked to that, maybe a question for us to think about is also, is in all the cases the focus on country levels good, or do we also need to find a way to look at maybe trade regions to incorporate policies on those levels? So that was it.
Thanks, Leanne. So I think what we're hearing from the different groups is, the strengths, the weaknesses, where we need to focus. I really like the points which came out around country level focus, Rex, and Leanne, what you're saying about going beyond cocktail parties and really hands-on, and that's what the accelerator seeks to do. So, but now we need to go beyond, get these inputs and actually make this happen by November, as Ian reminded us at the beginning. So we're going to hear from a few people who are thinking about doing things which could align, and some people who are already thinking about making this happen, like Ian and ourselves. So maybe quickly hearing some, what's the way forward, and not just from one person, from multiple people. So Leanne, I'm gonna, since you closed here, I'm gonna ask you, because we have the Coalition on Nature Positive Innovation. How do you plan to, what's your intent in the next part of this year?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I think at Climate, we're really looking forward to get this accelerator going. Also because, as we saw today, SMEs can really play a really good part in the MPI, in the nature positive innovation scaling. And so part of that is the UN Food System Summit Coalition on Nature Positive Innovations, where next to the accelerator, we're also working to identifying like the bottlenecks, also some of which we spoke of today, also looking at different stakeholder groups working on nature positive innovation, so also the SMEs. So I'm also really inviting everyone on the call that's interested in joining the coalition or our work there to reach out, because we're happy to have a conversation. And then secondly is indeed the COP food pavilion that we already spoke about, where we'll be organizing events, and I think we're more than happy to also get like events there focusing on the accelerator and also the SMEs there, and really getting their thoughts, linking that to policy processes as well. So that's information.
Thanks, Leanne. Ian, what are you planning to do?
Well, as the Good Food Hub, we need to make sure that these SMEs turn up. We've already got 800 great SMEs around the world that are in there. So certainly we were going to grow that network and be ready to bring in a great community of SMEs into this space. And then as Wasafiri, which is my kind of systems change agency that is my company, we're really keen to keep developing this idea, integrating the input you've all made into a concept that's compelling, and keep reaching out to many of you on this call to say, how can we resource this and try and hold the middle where we actually project manage, bring together what will be quite a diverse partnership to deliver on it. So I want to keep holding that. And I'm curious to know who else on the call is willing to lean in and bring some, resources in kind or in cash to make this happen.
Thanks, Ian. So maybe I'll turn to you now, Dan Haglund from FCDO. You have a coalition of impact investors, over 40 of them, who have over $6 billion in their portfolio. So how do you view this, and how can we connect the dots here?
Thank you, Danush. Yeah, just to say thanks again for having me here today. I think, a lot of what's been said resonates very much with the thinking we've been doing for the Climate Shot Impact Investing Coalition. So by way of background, this was something we started developing ahead of COP26, really in response to what was, a growing focus among investors, donors, philanthropists as well, on investing in nature positive, sort of climate smart agriculture, but really there being a shortage of basically still being a shortage of capital that actually reached companies. So what we're trying to do is we've brought together a group of impact investors, as well as sort of impact measurement specialists, fintech providers, and so on. And we're kind of looking at setting up a structure around that to kind of help facilitate and sort of strengthen matchmaking between these organizations, because we have in there, the development finance institutions doing really bigger ticket sizes, smaller impact funds, philanthropies, and so on doing smaller investments, but really getting these people to share best practices. There's lots of knowledge out there about what works and what doesn't work, but we need to get better at kind of coming to a common understanding around that. I think there's the matchmaking piece, there's the metrics piece, which has also come up in the conversations, which is really key. And how do we get better at valuing the non-market benefits from providing services to farmers that help them with adapting to climate change, or help them, restore, improve soil quality, or protect biodiversity, and so on. So lots of innovations happening in that space that we want to then kind of test it in an action-oriented way across these sort of 35 odd organizations in the coalition, and then sort of working towards a more formal launch of the thing at COP27, backed by some resources that we're hoping to put in from the FCDO side, and perhaps co-funding as well. But I think, we're almost out of time, so I think what I'll probably do is share further information about this initiative with this group, because I think there's lots of people on the call today that we would love to hear from, and I think it would be a good fit with the work we're thinking about for this as well.
Thanks, Dan. And I think that's really, I think it's all about connecting the dots to actually make this happen. And it's really great that we can link to that momentum that's been built up on Climate Shot Impact Investors Coalition. I also want to get, we're short of time, but also get some more additional views on how we can move forward. And your intent, commitment, interest in working with us. So Erin, I'm really inspired always by your words and your work. How can we work with you and USFRA in the lead up to COP27?
Put me on the spot. Hey, congratulations, by the way. I saw your big LinkedIn post. You're a big dog now. That's awesome. On your new academic achievement. So great job. No, I think that we stand by. I was texting Ian and Nikki to help support. I know Tim's part of our TI working group on finance. This has been a common thing that we've heard as we looked at the landscape of startups, like how do you connect in to broader and then elevate the amazing work that's going on. So I know Ian and Nikki, we've all said we all have so many ideas, lack of resourcing, and we're in the growth mode. So I'm applying for grants. We'll write this in. We'll try to keep creating connection points and staying committed to continue to collaborate. So amazing work here.
Thanks, Erin, for that willingness to collaborate and make this happen. I really like that attitude that you bring, always getting things done. And thanks for the congratulatory message as well. Mike, would you like to just come and you put in something on chat? And I think it's really, you bring that whole dimension around blue foods. And do you see any opportunities to work with us moving forward?
Yeah, thanks, Danish. Thanks for the invitation to participate. So we had some useful discussions in the group, but basically actually yesterday talking with an impact investor who's based, global impact investor, but they're based here in Thailand. And we started to talk about an accelerator program here for aquaculture startups and interesting conversation about nature positive innovations as well, including you know, what are they? You know, how do you measure them? And you know, how do you pick them out of the group? So a number of fundamental questions there, and some of the group provided some insights to help with those. But happy to bring that sort of more fishy side into the next steps here, and we may be able to offer something in perhaps based in Thailand as initial. More fish-based type accelerator program to feed in, but more thinking and networking to do, but happy to take it forward from here. And as we know, water covers 70% of the planet, so don't forget the fish as you move this forward. Anyway, thanks for being part of the group. Really enjoyed today. Okay.
And just very quickly, Thailand's one of the countries who are supporting this coalition, so maybe there's something we can follow up
that's
there.
Good to know. Okay. Yeah,
so great inputs, very, very exciting. And yeah, I think we really want to make this work together with you. And yeah, if we can keep up this level of excitement, I can kind of imagine arriving in Egypt with a cohort of these innovative businesses and showcasing that and really setting that agenda there. But Ian, any closing words from you?
Really, just thank you. I hope you all stay on the journey with us here. You know, I think it's going to be, I feel like we've got a great idea that's going to finally kind of be more action oriented, you know, actually be measured by whether we're seeing investment into businesses like this. That's very tangible outcome, but it will force us to think holistically about all the steps, all the elements it takes to actually open up those investment flows and drive this transition that's so important to the future of people and planet. Yeah.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us, and really looking forward to working with you in the lead up to COP27.